Record. Cool. All righty,
Test.
Eric. Do you are you all set up then? We've got sound
Yeah,
and
yeah,
everything.
I'm rocking and rolling over here.
Awesome. Thanks so much for taking the time, Eric. When we met, I believe it was at MJ BizCon just briefly. I got your book Pressure afterwards. Really enjoyed the read. It's an exciting book, quick read, entertaining. Got some good kind of thoughts from there, some life lessons. So it kind of had it all. So I really enjoyed it. And that's why I was curious to bring you onto the podcast. At Dope CFO, we kind of approach cannabis from the accounting and finance side. Obviously, you approach cannabis from just smuggling and lifestyle side. So I figured it'd be good for us to chat.
Definitely. I'm happy you had me on. It was great meeting you at the show, and I'm always open to new and interesting questions. I'm not sure which direction you're going to take this, but I'm pretty much an open book. So,
Nice, nice. I appreciate that. I mean, let's just get started with the book Pressure and kind of we can go from the beginning, kind of your story. Tell us a little bit about college, kind of expanding your operations after college, and then I guess all the way right up to the end. It's a pretty interesting story. The big picture for everybody, shocker if you don't know. At the end, he buys his way out of prison for roughly, 10 plus million in gold bars. I think it was closer to 12. But yeah, tell us a little bit about your story, Eric, just kind of from the book's perspective from
all
the
right.
beginning.
Well, I didn't sell drugs or cannabis specifically just to be rich and be a baller and have rents. I kind of did it in a position where I was in a position where basically I needed food and a safe place to sleep at night as a kid. So I started selling weed at a very young age, and it afforded me things like Taco Bell and new sneakers, whatever I wanted, really. I ended up going away to college. I still continued selling weed. And by age 29, I become one of the largest high-end distributors on the East Coast of the United States. I was smuggling weed out of Canada via 18-wheelers, boats, bring it down into New York, and then I set up a hub and warehouse there and smuggled it to different states throughout the East Coast. I had an account in every single state between New Orleans and Boston. By age 29, I'd done well over $300 million worth of sales in the East Coast of the United States. Now, what's really unique about my organization is I did it all without a gun or the feds even knowing I existed. So there's bigger players than me, but those guys, they're known by the feds and they take out witnesses, So I was a level 9 in the underworld. Level 10 is where you take out the witnesses. I have the intelligence where I could have done that, but I just didn't want to cross that path. So, I went to prison. I did my time. I didn't want to work undercover for them. So eventually, after a couple of years, my lawyer came to me in prison. He's like, hey, listen, well, I was actually jail at that time, but he's like, listen, if you give them the rest of your money, they'll let you out. And I didn't know what to think. But after a few weeks, I made a deal where I ended up going in shackles in the woods, surrounded by over 20 ATF, DEA agents, and dug up close to $10 million worth of gold bars, gave them to the federal government, and they let me out. There's a lot more in the story. It's about love, acceptance, family, fitting in with your neighbors, becoming the one, trying to overcoming adversity, being in a position where you don't think you're going to make it and you're ready to jump, alcohol, drugs, sex, escorts, chasing, yeah, a lot of crazy stuff in there. But at the end of the day, it's a book really for anybody. You don't have to be in the underworld to want to read something like this. But I learned a lot. I learned a lot in the underworld, and specifically in the cannabis business. And here I am in New York State now, and cannabis is becoming legal here. So I partnered up with a cultivator in New York State, and we're just getting ready to start rocking and rolling. We'll see how things open up. I have a few reservations about what's going on in New York State, but we'll see how it goes,
For sure, for sure. Yeah, it is interesting times, especially since so much has changed in the last 10 years, 15 years around cannabis, hell, even the last 5 years. Back to like right after college, when you were starting to move larger quantities of cannabis and weight, was there ever any issues you being like essentially like a younger person in the cannabis space? Like who were some of these characters that you were dealing with? Just kind of looking at you, you look like a pretty like clean shaven New York, white kid, definitely like on the
Yeah,
kid side. So like,
yeah.
how did that ever like? What were those interactions like?
Well, it's kind of that's what helped kept me. That's what kept me off the DEA's radar for so long. I was you would never know, right? Anytime I'd meet a girl at a bar or something, they ask what do you do? They think I work with computers or something. I just tell them I'm an entrepreneur at that time. And keep in mind, when I did all this, smuggling. This was before cannabis was legal in any state in the United States. It was first legal in Colorado in I think 2012. So I did all this. I eventually got arrested in 2009, but it started for me in the late 90s into the early 2000s. And it started just in high school with going to the other side of town, the house that has, a leaking swimming pool, gutters hanging off the side of the house, and the lawn hasn't been mowed in 4 months, and you walk in and it's just a rundown rental apartment, and you buy an ounce of weed off some guy that's double your age, and then you take it home and you cut it up and you have enough to buy a couple cans of beer, a little extra food, and some free weed to smoke with your friends to get high. I really got high, man. I got high so I wouldn't have to face my reality, but there's a lot of other reasons to get high. But the type of characters I met were anywhere from everyday white collar guys to guys that are in bikers gangs, guys with turbans on their heads, every different skin color you can imagine. I worked with a wide variety of people, and at the end of the day, everybody's in it just because they want to put food on the table for the ones they love. Really, most of the people that are dealing drugs had a troubled childhood, or they're in a position where they didn't have what the other kids had, and it's their only resort. It's not like the kids grow up and say, I want to be a drug dealer when I grow up,
Right. And then I know that you had opened up the pond business relatively quickly after graduation as well to kind of serve as your front. How did you like the pond business? I feel like you could have just set up a fake consulting company or something, but like you actually were putting in ponds and like genuinely doing the work. Like I think that the book you'd mentioned, you were actually like published in magazines. So it's like, it was clearly something that you enjoyed doing. But yeah, how'd you get into the pond business, and are you still in the pond business?
Yeah, well, when I was in Plattsburgh State, I graduated with a 4-year degree in business management. In my last year of college, I had a brief window when the DEA was watching me for a couple weeks. They had a couple kids wear wires. Because they had a coke bust, and I was kind of at the tail end of their bust, and they wanted to get the weed guy. They considered me to be the financial backer for the coke business, even though I wasn't touching coke. There was just a whole misunderstanding there. But they had a couple kids. They watched me for a little bit, and when they were watching me, that's when I realized I needed to go deeper underground and start a legitimate business. So as soon as I graduated college, I moved about 100 miles away from the Canadian border, maybe a little more, to get away from that heat. I was just a small guy anyway, so they weren't going to waste too much resources investigating me. But still, it pushed me to start a legitimate business, building natural swimming pools and waterfalls in people's backyards so people wouldn't be asking questions where my income came from. So I took some courses on how to do that, and I made good money. I could install a water feature anywhere from the low end $8,000 all the way up to 40, 50 grand. These are balanced ecosystems, and I liked working with the dirt, rocks, and water, but I still like the weed game. So during the day I had my legitimate business, and at night when everybody went to bed is when I got to work in the underworld, and I distributed cannabis pretty much everywhere except in my hometown. I never distributed in my hometown because I didn't want anybody to know who I was. I only wanted them to know me as a legitimate businessman. So all my stuff went downstate, specifically out of state along the East Coast, different drivers, different warehouses. I had over 14 cell phones at any one given time. I had a PGP encrypted BlackBerry. That means we had our own server set up. So even when I got busted, they took the BlackBerry, set it down to Washington, and they couldn't crack it. I don't even know how that was set up. I don't even know how to do that, but I know it worked. So the water feature business was basically just a front. It was all legitimate. I didn't commingle my illegitimate proceeds with my legitimate proceeds, but it was just a way to have people not ask me questions about where my income came from.
I feel like, just looking through the bigger picture, I feel like that was very beneficial in the long run. I think you were able to keep a fair amount of your legitimate assets, bank accounts, real estate, etc., even after all was said and done, which I find fascinating. Okay, nice. What do you do nowadays then? Now that you're jail, you're kind of on your own. What are you up to nowadays?
Well, this book I just finished, Pressure. The book took me, bro, 6 years to write. I originally hired a ghostwriter, wrote a couple chapters, and it just wasn't sounding like me. I had to take courses. I had to spend endless days in libraries reading books and learning, and weeks, months, years rereading, refine. There's so many layers and dots that needed to be connected to make the story the proper arc to hold readers' attention. And not only every single page, I had to make sure what's in it for the reader. I had to read it and be like, okay, big deal. I did this. I sold weed. I overcame adversity. I had pain. Yay, yay, yay. But what's in it for the reader? So it took me 6 years, dude, to get to this point. And I sacrificed a lot of startups and other businesses I could have been involved in. So I was just living off savings over the past few years. I did small projects. I have some little things, friends, family, stuff like that, but I haven't been balling out like the old days. But now that the book's done, I am now invested in a legal cannabis business in New York State. It's just an outdoor cultivation facility in upstate New York. New York State just came online. They're starting to open up retail locations, supposedly. And they have one open. We'll see what they're going to do. How many more? I'm not exactly sure, but I'm hoping they do the right thing. So that's where I'm hoping my income will come from in the future here, is the legal cannabis business. And eventually I'll move that money into building off-grid retreats where people can go reset and recharge.
Nice. Off-grid retreats. I know a few people that do that. Yeah, let's talk through the cash a little bit. So kind of when you're operating, just to kind of go back to like, you're operating, there's cash obviously everywhere. From the accounting perspective and just cannabis in general, cash controls matter. You know, we need to know where the cash is and that it's protected because it's cannabis. It's unique. We can't use, you know, traditional business services. So we have a lot of cash we have to deal with in cannabis, just to keep it simple. When you had your cash, how did you manage it? Did you have multiple warehouses? How long did you store it? Did you ever put it into the bank or try to kind of get it into other assets? What did you do with your cash other than the gold bars?
Yeah, I didn't commingle funds. A lot of drug dealers will commingle funds and run it through a legitimate business. I didn't do that. But what I did do is, well, I buried a lot. I bought gold and buried the gold. But as far as cash management, bro, there were times I had so much cash, like $1 million in 20s weighs close to 100 pounds. A bill weighs 0.999 grams. So there was a time I remember I was in the like 45th floor or something of the Mandarin Oriental with my ex-girlfriend. And I had close to $2 million in cash in the closet, which weighed, well, it was over $2 million. It weighed around 200 pounds if I had to guesstimate. And I couldn't get out of the hotel. She was yelling, calling me a drug dealer. And I was really scared because I would have needed a bell cart to get it down. At any minute, security could be called. So when you have the amount of cash I was moving around, you actually need stash houses. I had specific houses that would just store cash. I had a specific house that would just store inventory product. I'd have a specific house just for meetings, for distribution and receiving. I had another house where I just sleep and keep my cell phones. So, dude, one time I went to go do my laundry and I went to open the thing and I was like over $1 million sitting in there. I totally forgot somebody had put it in there like a week earlier. They had to drop money to me. I just told them throw it there and I forgot. But there was a lot of cash around. It weighs a lot of money. It's bulky. That's why I switched to gold. There are other ways to move cash around, which I didn't do through legitimate businesses, right? You could have a restaurant. You could have a laundromat. You could have any type of cash business, pizza joint, you name it. A lot of the restaurants, or a lot of the businesses that everyday people that might be listening here or go to, not a lot. There's at least one business everybody's walked into that's I shouldn't even say that. Let's just put it this way. Drugs are moving around you at all times every single day. They drive by you past the road in 18-wheelers. There's drug deals happening at the corner of the gas station parking lot while you're pumping your gas. They're happening in the hotel lobby. Pretty much every single day all around you or within the vicinity of you, there's a drug dealer happening. Drugs help people cover pain. People need drugs, want drugs. Some people think they're fun. Sometimes they help people cover the reality. Sometimes they help people not kill themselves. Now, most drug dealers, the majority of them are lower level drug dealers. So they just use the money to support their family, right? Pay the rent, pay the bills, take the kids out to dinner, take them on a little vacation. the higher end drug dealers have legitimate businesses, and you just don't know who they are. This could be a white collar guy, could be have his own jet. You just don't know. But I don't know if that answers your
It's
question.
interesting. To your point, yeah, having so much cash and then it's incriminating as well. And so you're like, oh man, it's not even like I have 200 pounds of grass on me. I have 200 pounds of cash, which is almost just as incriminating. So yeah, don't want to have to explain that to anybody. Thinking through from the business side again, from an accounting side, we normally have to track accounts receivable and accounts payable. So sometimes we'll make a sale. In cannabis, it would be like selling on the front or consignment. When you were operating, did you ever have to give out large amounts of cannabis on the front on a credit basis? How did you track who owed you money? How long would you let that go for? And then on the other side, accounts payable, like were you ever in a situation where you took cannabis on the front and you had to pay this back in 30, 60, 90 days? How did that work for you from like an accounts payable, accounts receivable perspective?
Yeah, I never had any accounts payable. I didn't take anything on the front. I was a cash on delivery guy, so most of all my suppliers really liked that. There were a couple suppliers that didn't take cash on delivery because they never wanted to have cash and drugs at the same in the same location at the same time, so they would wait a day or two to pick up the cash. But just because it doesn't look good in the court of law to have cash and drugs in the same location, right? Because then that's called drug dealing. If you have just drugs in a spot, that's just drugs, or just cash, that's just cash. But two in the same place, that's a problem. As far as people that owed me money, all my accounts, most all of them had credit lines with me of up to $1 million. I had a couple guys. My biggest credit line I ever gave out was close to $3 million. That's just because I had so much inventory that wasn't moving that I just needed to get it out the door and make space and try to move product. I lowered prices and I increased the credit line to people that I trusted. But if I gave somebody a $1 million credit line, I'd usually be paid back within a couple of weeks. I wouldn't let $1 million like sit out for 30 plus days. So I guess you could say it was net 15 days. I don't know. I never really thought about it, but yeah, pretty much every one of my customers had up to $1 million credit line. Now there were a few smaller guys that stuck with me for 15 years that never got big, but they would just be smaller guys. But
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And then one kind of like last accounting question, then we'll move on to the New York kind of cannabis market current state. But from an accounting perspective, like, yeah, your inventory turnover rate. So say you purchase 100 pounds of grass, you don't want to sit on it for too long, for a plethora of reasons. So when you would get an order in, how quickly would it take you in days to turn that inventory all the way over and purchase a new shipment of inventory on average?
Depended on the time of season. Summertime was notoriously a drought. Like late summer back in the early 2000s was a drought. And I think that's because in Canada, it was just too expensive to cool the grow rooms with all the lights, right? It gets really hot in these grow rooms in the summer. It's just not cost effective. So they'd shut them down in the summer. Now, I don't know if that's exactly the reason, but that's what I was told at times. So regardless, there was usually a drought slowly in July, mostly in August and in September. And then things would pick up back in late fall, early winter. And during that drought, I could move unlimited weed. Like if I had 10, $20 million worth of product, which I never had at any one time, it would have been gone within a day. But on average, I was moving, I don't know, last few years, I was probably moving about 60 million a year worth of product, right? So some weeks I could move 3 million. Other weeks I'd only move 500,000. It really depended on the time of year, but it was very consistent. I always had inventory. My customers were always supplied when they needed it, just because any customer that stuck with me year round and didn't go other places, I made sure that they always had product even when there was a drought.
Cool. Appreciate that. That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. So then you're still living in Saratoga Springs in New York. New York, obviously it's a massive market. It's like an impactful market. So everybody's watching it to see what happens. Rec is legal, to your point. They're still rolling it out and there's a lot, unknowns yet, but people are braving it and moving forward. So what's your current take on just the legal New York cannabis market, and then kind of after that, their comparison to the legacy or black market, and how to kind of, who do you think is going to win out? So what's your take on the current New York cannabis market?
Well, New York State, since I've been in the business, since I started well over 20 years ago, New York has always been the most competitive marketplace in the United States. And the infrastructure, the delivery system that's set up in Manhattan and that's been there since the early 2000s, or probably even before that. The infrastructure is extremely established. It's very efficient. Everybody knows where to get the best weed. The weed that's down in New York City is better than most dispensaries, and well, at least in Massachusetts for sure. Here's the problem I see: the New York State cannabis potency tax. This is the number one problem that could really crush the potential of this legitimate market really thriving. It'll still thrive. There's so much money to be made in New York. A lot of people here, but they have a potency tax. So let's say I have a pound of cannabis that tests at 20%. I have to pay somewhere around $400 or $500 per pound in potency tax, just at 20%. And most cannabis that sells in these retail shops will probably be testing on average 25%. So what's that going to be, like $600 a pound cannabis potency tax? That cannabis potency tax is really going to hurt cultivators. It's really going to, their margins are already squeezed enough because there's certain expenses they can't write off because cannabis is still legal. Now you introduce this potency tax. It's just really going to be a huge burden on the cultivators. And everybody thinks this is a get rich, get quick thing. And it's not. There's a lot of overhead costs, especially when you're growing indoors. You're really going to have a sharp pencil to survive this marketplace, because even in the first year, the prices I'm seeing here in the first year in the legitimate market are pretty low after you pay all these fees and taxes and compliance, man, just the compliance and software. One simple fix to making New York 100% thrive and to weed out the players in the black market would be for them to remove the potency tax. The black market is thriving. There are still 18-wheelers of cannabis coming here from the West Coast, flooding the streets, and it's beautiful cannabis. And if the New York State government wants to compete with that, my opinion is eliminate the potency tax. This will allow more legitimate cultivators to thrive in the space. And by having more legitimate cultivators thrive in the space, they'll be able to collect their taxes elsewhere, such as New York State income tax. So the initial greed right there, I think is going to potentially have it's going to be some downstream impact from that. I know personally, I mean, $600 a pound to take that in tax, that's huge. That's more than the growers will probably make. That's more than anybody along the line will make. And that's how much that they're going to be taking. Dude, there's nothing else to even talk about. It's just that right there. Like that one simple thing. Like you could write pages and pages of stuff to legislators. Oh, we should change this. We should change that. No, it's the potency tax. And you're talking to somebody. Why? You're talking to me that has the most experience in the underworld, probably in the state, for cannabis. 300 million. I did it. It's not a joke. You could read the court records. Like I paid the fine, 12 million plus. Well, close to 12 million. Well, it wasn't really a fine. I voluntarily surrendered the money so I wouldn't have to work undercover for them. So that's what happened. It's all in the book, actually. But what I'm really suggesting from a business standpoint, the way I was so successful in my business is because I wasn't greedy. My margins were small, dude. Sometimes I'd only make 6% on my deals after all my expenses. Sometimes 10%. But if I tacked a potency tax on the stuff I was doing, bro, like none of my customers would come to me. They'd be like, Eric, you're crazy. I built slow and steady. I was fair with everybody. Everybody made a little money along the way. And I lasted for 13 years in the game. And that's a very long time without being on the DEA's radar at my scale. Actually, it's unheard of. There's a lot of players that'll run big numbers like me, 2-3 years, and then they catch heat. But I did it skillfully. And I did it slow, steady wins. And New York State should approach it the same way. Slow, steady wins. Everybody eats, everybody wins. We're all happy.
No, I couldn't agree more. It's that short-term greediness that a lot of these states have when they set up these programs, and it's unfortunate because it's going to make it take longer for the legal industry to get its feet underneath it. Because to your point, I live in Wisconsin where we don't even have a medical program, and so it's just like, yeah, there is still a legacy market because there has to be. To your point, everybody wants cannabis. That need will never go away at this point. So yeah, that is interesting. And then just at the federal level, there's no deductions, no credits. Yeah, so the retailers really get squeezed. And then that kind of same mindset, have you had any experience with the license application process for New York State, and kind of how do you have any insight on the cannabis business license application process?
I don't. I didn't apply. I just partnered up with somebody that already had a license. I know I have a lot of friends, not a lot, but a handful of friends that have applied. They haven't received word if their application was accepted yet. That's just starting. So I don't really know much about the application process. I know a lot of people are waiting. I know there's holdups. I'm kind of bummed that the retail outlets aren't open. They only opened one. And I kind of suspected what they were going to do. And that's a little disappointing because I know friends right now that have their application and they have money in hand ready to open a retail outlet. So I don't know what the holdup is. I'm not in the OCM office. They should probably call me though, because I could really help them and everybody would win. They need to open the retail outlets because there's a lot of farmers out there, good farmers that worked really hard and dumped in hundreds of thousands of dollars to grow their crop. And some of them, it's tough times for a lot of people, right? Like a lot of people's retirement accounts are being cut in half. They're trying to feed their families. And at the end of the day, if you want to get into business doing anything, you can't just think about yourself. You need to think about everybody around you. You know, the way I won is because I put myself last. My suppliers came ahead of me. They were paid. My customers came ahead of me. My employees came ahead of me. After everybody around me was taken care of, then I went to sleep. Then I went out to eat. And then I felt at peace. And that's how, if you, any organization or any ship you want to run, you better be ready to put yourself last. And that's how you create winners. And that's what New York State needs to start doing, is they need to stop thinking about, see, here's the deal. They're put out, oh, deadlines. You got to meet this deadline. You got to meet this deadline. What about the deadlines they should be meeting? They should have a deadline. We're going to have 30 dispensaries open in 60 days. Well, if they don't meet that deadline, what's going to happen? So that's just the way I see it. It's got to be a fair playing field, man. This is the problem, man. This is why people are frustrated. Why do you think people run around or going to doctors, psychologists, everything like that, bro? Everything needs to be a fair playing field if you want to run a big organization and make a lot of money. And I could talk for days, but I don't want to bore your listeners.
No worries, Eric. I appreciate your insight. Yeah, kind of switching gears away from the cannabis business market, just because I found this aspect of the book very interesting. Can we talk just a little bit as we wrap up here about kind of your time in entertainment, the documentary, kind of like the insights of women? And I guess at the end of the book, you were dating Ava. So, I mean, are you guys still together? You know, can we get a recap on that?
No.
So how was it? What made you want to get into making a documentary about what women think?
No, I was just that was, oh my God, that was 2006. I was only, 27 years old. I was just a young
How old
kid.
are you now?
I'm 44, man.
Okay, like 15 years ago.
Yeah, it was a long
Do you have
time
any?
ago. I didn't know much about women back then. I was insecure. I was a late bloomer, man. All I did was work in high school and college and party really hard. I didn't really have any I didn't have any girlfriends, maybe one that I didn't even know what to do with or how to handle. So basically, after my first breakup in 2006, I had a lot of extra money. So I just decided to travel around the country with a film crew. I interviewed hundreds of women in various cities through lavish rooftop parties, yacht parties, hot tubs, all that stuff. Just a young boy, kind of like what Dan Blazarian did, but I did it, I don't know, 10 years before him. And I didn't have Instagram or any way to show it. I do have some video clips up on YouTube. Some I took down because honestly, it was an embarrassment. It was an insecure Eric, right? Like trying to say, look at me, my name's Eric. Do you love me now? I did it. It was just a immature Eric, but that's way old, still old stuff. So
No worries, no worries. Well, I guess
yeah.
then going forward, you got the book. Kind of what are your future plans? Obviously, you have the cultivation partner, we have the book. Kind of what's next for Eric Canori as we get into 2023, or asked a different way, what excites you about 2023, Eric?
Oh man, 2023. Well, what I'd first like to do is sell some books. I want people to read this book, so not because they hear my story so they can reflect on their own life. I spent a lot of time and several years going back to make sure there's knowledge and wisdom peppered throughout that people can apply to their daily lives so they can overcome adversity and go out into the world and get whatever they want in life. And that's what I really did. It's an entertaining book, and it's like I said, it's titled Pressure by Eric Canori. I want to sell the book. Then I want somebody to come to me and say, hey, Eric, we really like your story. Let's make it a series. And then after that, I want to build retreats near fresh water sources around the United States. Fresh water heals, in my opinion. When I used to trip out and eat a lot of psychedelics when I was younger, I always gravitated towards fresh water. It had something soothing about it. So anyway, I want to build retreats near fresh water sources with infrared saunas, cold plunges, fire to table food, and just a healthy vibe where people can go reset. Because at the end of the day, we plug our phones into charge, we plug our cars into charge, but the human body isn't necessarily being plugged into spaces that charge us. And a lot of us are running around right now just trying to keep up, and we're tired. So I'm going to create places that are healthy, organic, low chemicals, in harmony with nature, natural sunlight, and good vibes.
Nice. I feel like that's a retreat I would definitely visit.
All right. All right,
Um,
dude.
Other than that, where can they find you, Eric? Are you on, I'm sure you're a modern man, you're probably on all the socials, but if people want to buy the book or just get in contact with you, kind of where can they find the book, and how can
Yeah.
they get a hold of you?
Well, my name's Eric Canori. The way you spell my last name is Canori. You can Google me. I'm on all social media. Eric Canori is my handle. Eric Canori is my website. Amazon, you can type in Eric Canori. Google. So that's me, Eric Canori. You can get a hold of me. You can also, if you want to DM me on Instagram, or you can go to my website, send me a private message. Anybody that's interested in help with anything, if you're in a position where you don't think you're going to make it, DM me. If you read my book and there's something you really liked about it, DM me. If you're in the New York cannabis space, DM me. If sometimes I like to go to Florida and cut loose. If there's any good parties in Florida, DM me. If you need help, you read my book, so you know. If anybody, there's been a time in my life where, man, I've been at the bottom and I've been at the top, and no matter who you are, everybody struggles sometimes, man. So I don't have big plans, bro. I live day to day. I've been airlifted to the ICU twice, ambulances countless times, caught on fire, collapsed lung, broken ribs, jail, prison, seen so much, seen the white light, and here it is. I'm kind of just like thankful for today, right? A little work, little exercise, a little fun. I kind of just live balanced for today. So I don't have huge plans, but Raymond, it's tough talking to you because I can't see you on the screen, dude. So I feel like I'm talking to myself. There we go. There we go. That's a little better. Fuck yeah. So that's it, man. That's it, man. I appreciate you having me on.
I can appreciate that too. It's like a little bit of work, a little bit of play, a little bit of health. I mean, it's really a good life. We're not trying to, reinvent the wheel here. So I can appreciate that. Thanks for taking the time to jump on with us. I don't know when we'll get this out. I'll work with my team and kind of follow up with you, but thanks so much, and kind of we'll be in touch. All right, Eric, let me stop the recording now.
All right.
Recording. Yeah, my